Hello, dialoguers. I'm Laura Humm, one of the Dialogue Doctor coaches, and today I'm here with Ted Atchley. Did I get it right?
Yep.
Excellent. I practiced it in my head after you told me how to pronounce it. And we're going to do an edit today. Ted, you want to tell us a little bit about yourself and kind of your writer journey?
Sure. In 2017, I always been kind of a hobbyist, always enjoyed writing, but 2017 got real serious about it. Took a course and started working on my debut, which came out in 2023. And then
Congratulations.
thank you. I'm very excited about that. So after, as I was wrapping that up, I started thinking about, what was going to be next. And so I started working on this story, um, you know, mid late 2023, and have been kind of going. My debut was sci-fi, but I've always, I love Star Wars, and I love Dragonlance. So I've always been this weird kind of fantasy and sci-fi. So my first novel was kind of diving into my sci-fi roots, although it's much more around my debut is much more an homage to The Matrix than to Star Wars. A lot of Star Wars novels out there, so I wanted to go a little different direction. And then, but this one I kind of was diving back into my fantasy roots and trying to come up with something that this kind of comes out of some ideas that I've just been really excited about, just can't stop thinking about.
Hmm.
And so this kind of world and story is something that I'm really excited to kind of flesh out and have it come to life.
Excellent, excellent. And this one is young adult
Yep,
and
young adult fantasy.
young adult fantasy. And was your debut also young adult or
My
more
debut was actually more adult.
adult?
The main character there is late 40s, which I happen to be late 40s when I wrote that. So
A little easier to write in the persona that you're in.
right.
Um, tell us a little bit about kind of the challenges that you're facing in writing this young adult story and what you want us to work on today.
Yeah, so I feel pretty good about a lot of the basics of structure and showing and not telling. And in fact, sometimes I think I go a little too far. Um, Sometimes I've been told that like I don't tell enough I work on that as well. But
Hmm.
what I'm struggling with, what I have consistently heard from critique partners and editors, is this idea. One of them called it scriptitis. Another one of my critique partners like, you should write screenplays. And I'm like, why should I write screenplays? Because all your stuff reads like a screenplay. I'm like, is that a good thing?
I mean, screenplays are important too.
Yeah,
Um,
just not what I was really going for.
so when they're saying that you have screenitis and that they read like screenplays, what do you think is kind of behind that?
I think it's that especially the dialogue, for my characters is fairly interchangeable. Um, I mean, you literally could take a line that this character said, change the tag, and it would still pretty much work.
For
Instead of
anyone else?
Torin said, Nora said, or Layla said, depending on which character it is. So, I think that's really the root of it is that there's not I faced this a little bit in my debut too. So I changed one character to kind of
Hmm.
do the kind of, I'm going to talk almost like a computer thing just to try to add a little distinction.
Hmm.
So it's something I've struggled with for a while. And so, something of Jeff's teaching is not getting to the page. So I've got to figure out where's the knowledge not becoming wisdom.
Okay. All right. Well, I'm sure that he would appreciate that analogy. But I just want to validate you in saying that writing character voices that don't sound like us is a very challenging thing and it takes a lot of time. The good news is, with a little bit of practice, you will absolutely be able to get this. So you sent me two chapters today that are kind of mid-story, one from each of your lead characters. Um, and these are pretty emotional scenes, right? You have your younger character, your female lead. She just went through, well, why don't you tell it? Why am I telling you? You tell your story.
So in this world, there's a coming of age kind of sorting hat ritual you go through at 16 that determines your caste in society. And my younger character, Layla, 16 years old, in the just has gone through this ceremony, and more than anything else, she wanted to. So if you think about kind of a bell curve, there's on the one end, you can get sorted into um, the highest class, which are called the gifted. And then most people, like your bell curve, are just ordinary people. No special gifting, no magic, nothing. They're just ordinary people. And then the other end of the bell curve, you have the lowest class, which are referred to as ticks. And they are basically social pariahs. Um, they're treated poorly. And so she's just found out that she's been sorted as a tick. Um, so it's pretty devastating. All she wanted to be was, ordinary person.
Normal.
Yeah,
Right.
just, you know, and her older brother, Torin, and his twin sister. So there's Torin and his twin Nora, and the younger sister of Layla. There's a brother, but he doesn't ever show up in this. There's another brother, Kareem, but he never shows up in these scenes. Um, but Torin and Nora were also both ticks. And so it's, this family's had some like really terrible luck on this because
Hmm.
that was the other thing for Layla. She's like, well, you know, the twins are ticks. Well, certainly won't happen to me. And then it does. So she's, basically my life is over. Whatever dreams I have are over. I'm just going to be a social pariah for the rest of my life. And it's just
Hmm.
she's dealing with that you know, when an offer comes along that she's not expecting. Um,
Yeah. So, and this scene, we'll start with this one. We'll talk about the Torrent scene in a few minutes.
yeah,
This scene is really relevant in a young adult series because what we love about young adult stories is that they replicate experiences that young adults are actually going through. This idea,
right.
not that in 2025 in American culture, teens are sorted, but there are cliques and there are friendships and there are teams and right, like this idea that you could be something and then not be able to achieve that. Often not by anything that you did, just there isn't enough space or there isn't, right, like all of these things and that disappointment that we can feel. One of the things that I love best about young adult fiction is just the rawness of the emotion on the page. As adults, we are taught over and over and over and over again. It's okay to have emotions, but you can only have them in this safe space, right? Like you can't have emotions in the real world. You can only have emotions when you're, in your house, when you're talking to your spouse, or, right? Like we're so conditioned that everything needs to be devoid of emotion because we need to protect other people's feelings. And again, like all of these things are good things, but they're very different than the way teenagers experience the world. Teenagers are all hormones and anger, right? Like everything for them is very big. They haven't really learned the tempering that adults learn. So, on one hand, it's really exciting to be able to read a young adult book. On the other hand, it's really difficult to write a young adult book because we spend our entire adult lives learning how to compensate for all of the struggles we had when we were in our
Right.
teens. So getting that on the page can be a real challenge. And as I was reading your story today, I loved what you said earlier about your analysis, where your story structure is right, right? Like you have a lot of great opportunities for conversation, but at the same time, I can see that some of that you must be very good at adulting. I can see that adult framework in your story. So, what I wanted to do is give you an opportunity to see what happens if we take those adult handcuffs off and we just let the emotion lead the story.
Okay.
And then I thought it might be fun to take part of the scene and do it together,
Okay.
figuring out the parts of the scene where we want to see the raw emotion and where we want to see kind of that containment. Does that plan
Awesome.
sound okay to you?
Yeah, that sounds great. That sounds really good. I'd like that.
Okay, great. I'm going to go ahead and share the screen. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to put, oh, not that. Thank you. Can you see it? I have two Word documents kind of
Yep.
overlapping each other.
Hmm.
Great. I'm going to put one on one side and the other on the other. And I know your scene, but sometimes hearing your scene out loud makes it feel a little bit different.
Okay.
So, not the greatest out loud reader, but if you will bear with me, I'm going to read the start of yours and then I will kind of talk through how I got to mine.
Okay. Great.
Okay. All right. So, chapter seven. Layla sat under the poplar tree as the lithing tunes and laughter of the festival dance filled the air. She made no effort to stop the tears streaming down her face. An unfamiliar weight and cold metal of her new inhibitor band pressed against her neck. Raquel had spun and twirled with at least three different boys already. Layla hadn't even been thinking about courting, but one day, eventually, it might be nice to have a family of her own. Now that dream was over, shattered like a dropped, I'm not going to pronounce that word, mug.
Okay.
Can you tell it to me?
Yeah, it's kava, but it's just
Ava.
basically my world's coffee. So,
Excellent. Okay. Uh, no one courted a tick. An ordinary person, that's all she wanted. But Nahara?
yeah,
See, I'm not
that's
good at reading out loud.
it's okay.
Nahara couldn't see fit to grant her that. Nope, he had made her a tick. Two ticks in one family was rare enough, but Nora and Torin being twins explained that. But three, unheard of. What must her parents have done in order to earn Nara's ear? Okay, so
Yeah,
I
yeah.
think that's ire, not ear. So you can see that there's a lot going on there, but it's very thoughtful in the hurt and the pain, right? Like she had all of these expectations of being an ordinary person, and now she's sorted into being a tick, which I mean, she kind of thought she had a free pass because two of her older siblings, like this was like not even in her realm of possibility, right?
Right.
But the only real emotional moment we have is she made no effort to stop her tears streaming down her face. Again, this is fantastic if we're in an adult story,
Okay.
but teenagers have a much harder time, and not to say that only teenagers read young adult fiction, because many of us adults do read it.
Sure.
Um, but if we kind of turn that around and take the most emotional part of this scene and move it right to the beginning, watch how it changes the feeling of the scene.
Okay.
So here's a potential edit for you. Layla's life was over. No one courted a tick. Not that she was ready to court, but one day she wanted a family of her own. She wanted to go home, but some reason that you'll know that I don't, that she had to say. So instead, she sat under the poplar, hating the lithing tunes and the laughter of the festival dance. This isn't how it was supposed to be. She wasn't supposed to be crying because of the cold metal inhibitor band. She was supposed to be celebrating with her friend. So taking those elements that you were talking about and moving them right to the top. So
Okay.
instead of the first thing that your reader sees is the tunes and the laughter juxtaposed with the tears streaming down her face, you're just starting with the moment. What's Layla feeling, right?
Okay.
And now you've set the stage for her so that the rest of her voice can start to come out based off of kind of that desperation that she's feeling.
Okay.
How do you feel about those two differences?
Yeah, I can see where that's more teenager.
Okay. So I went
Makes
on
sense.
and
Okay.
I kind of gave you two different options here
Good, good.
because you do this really great thing where you have all of your characters kind of start a scene very internalized and
Hmm.
then you give them somebody to talk to, right? Because That's what we want. We want to connect with people.
Yeah.
Um, so you have Raquel coming off the dance floor. Um, but you've given us, in my version, I took the most salient emotion, pulled it right to the beginning, and then kind of cut us off. The reason I cut us off without giving all the information is because I could see you giving the information in two different ways. You can give the information as more internal, or you can get her right into the dialogue. Both work. You can actually even blend them together if you want, but I wanted to give you some options because this is where your author voice is going to really come into the story.
Okay.
Once you know kind of all the different possibilities of how you can write, you can figure out, well, I like to write this way in these places and this way in these places. So, like towards the end of your book, as you get um, Layla, not as much Layla, but more her brother, when you're writing his point of view scenes, these really internalized thinkings might work really well for him as he reaches the place in his growth arc because you've got him at about 20. So presumably towards the end of the book, you want him kind of leaving that teenage angst and moving more into preparation for adulthood. So
Right.
kind of making that smooth transition from him from these really emotional moments to much more of what you have here can be really beneficial in a growth arc.
Okay.
Sorry, I'm mixing up the
It's
feedback for
okay.
both of the sections, but
It's
sometimes
okay.
it's good to have the options. So let me
Yeah.
just read these two options to you, and then we can kind of talk through what you like about it, and then we'll do an example together.
Awesome.
All right. So if she's going to stay in her head after she says she was supposed to be celebrating with her friend, we can continue with she and Raquel had been talking about the winnowing for weeks. Where would they be placed? What would they do after? Raquel had gotten everything she wanted and was now spinning and twirling without her. Layla wanted to be happy for her friend, but she couldn't be. Raquel got it all, and she got nothing. It wasn't supposed to happen this way. It couldn't happen this way. Family like hers, and then you can tell us a little bit about the family structure of her family don't have ticks, especially not three of them. It was a mistake. That's all it is. Nahara would see his mistake tomorrow. Somehow he was confused and would make it right tomorrow. But Nahara doesn't make mistakes. This must be her parents' fault. What had they done to earn Nahara's ire? Right? So you're taking the same information, but you're taking the adult filters off and you're thinking about it through the eyes of a teenager, right? What do
Mhm.
teenagers think? Well,
Right.
this has to be somebody else's fault. This can't be my fault, right? Like, nope, I didn't do anything wrong, right? Like, and that's where like taking these moments that you had about, Nahara didn't see fit to grant her that. Nope, he had made her a tick. Two ticks in a family was rare enough. That's a very adult logical processing of what happened. But if we
Okay.
take it and we go at it from the other direction, how does she feel in this moment? It was a mistake. That's it. That's all it was. It was a mistake. This can't actually be happening, right? Now her voice, her narration starts to sound a little bit different than her brother's because it's not all being told through the lens of this has all already happened. It feels much more right in the moment.
Okay.
Okay. And then we can start to add some dialogue in here. I didn't read the dialogue part of your story. So let me go back and read that out loud a little bit. So the dance ended. Raquel stepped off the stage and approached Layla's position. You okay? Raquel asked. Layla stared at her friend. Are you sure you want to be seen with a tick? Raquel squatted down, eye to eye with Layla. You're still my friend. The winnowing didn't change that. A warmth blossomed in Layla's stomach. She tried to fight the smile but couldn't. That's good too. Raquel, a deep baritone of Raquel's pa, called. He jogged over to the girls. What do you think you're doing? Raquel rose and stood firm. I'm talking to my friend. Raquel's pa grabbed her arm. Not anymore. I forbid you from socializing with their kind. Layla gestured toward the stage. Go on to the dance. One of us ought to enjoy the festival. Raquel's chin trembled. I'm sorry. Her pa pulled her by the elbow and guided her back to the dance. So what you've done here is you've given us this hope and this opportunity that perhaps this friendship could remain. And then you have the father come in and ruin it. And that works great. But teenage girls tend to be a little bit evasive when it comes to parental guidance, right? Raquel knows that her dad is probably walking around here and looking on the lookout for this. So changing the tone a little bit to make it more that Raquel wants to keep this friendship, which you have, I'm talking to my friend, she's standing firm against her dad. That works great. But what if we put it more of Raquel saying, hey, this is stupid. Let's just keep going, right?
Okay.
So as an option, we could go, come on, Raquel pleaded with her again. Come dance with me. Just leave me alone. Layla hated that her voice betrayed her. But you're my best friend. Raquel's face was so sad. Not anymore. Layla gave a cold laugh. Don't say that. Don't you ever say that to me. Better watch out. Here comes your dad. Raquel squealed and ducked behind the tree. See, Layla said, not any more. I just, don't bother. I'm a tick. You're not. But we can still be friends. Layla smiled at her, but it wasn't the same. Nothing would ever be the same. So I definitely took a ton of editorial liberties here
Sure.
to change the structure of the scene a little bit to
Hmm.
make it a much more intimate moment between them rather than a moment where Raquel is reaching out and her father pulls her away, right? Because adults and this is a little bit of a philosophy in crafting a scene for a young adult story
Okay.
versus kind of an edit.
Hmm.
But having your characters come to their own realizations about things in a young adult story is often more impactful than having an adult create a situation. Many young adult fiction and even um, early childhood fiction, you have an adult saying something and children are finding a way to circumvent that, right? So the father comes into the original scene and is like, no, you have to go away.
Yeah.
Well, Raquel's probably just in the next scene going to find a way to slip away from her dad and get back here. If you take that out and you let it be the threat of her dad coming, then Raquel has to come to the realization all on her own. So that's why I made the switch there. It also gave a little bit more of a dynamic that allowed us to play on the highs and the lows of what the relationship is. Raquel here has this pie in the sky. Um, it's okay, you can come dance with me, right? And
Yeah.
Layla is starting to understand that we can actually be friends. So she's starting to let that come out. Like, we can't be friends anymore, but that's going to hurt. So I'm going to go ahead and hurt you. And then you're right. Like that's what teenagers do. They don't think about the consequences of their action. They're not careful with their words. So being able to kind of pull back the layer of the adult conversation of, you're still my friend. The winnowing won't change that, right? Like that's what she's feeling, but she might, as a teenager, not have those words, right? But you're my best friend has much more resonation to it
Mhm.
than you're still my friend. Does that make sense?
Yeah. And as a dad, I'm probably that's probably why I went that direction because I'm thinking about what the dad would be doing.
Yep.
Get my daughter out of that negative situation that she doesn't even see as a negative situation.
Exactly. Exactly. And there, right, I love that you just said that, Ted, because that's exactly what tends to happen when we are adults writing teenage voices, right? We're looking out for all of those spaces where our character could potentially get into trouble, and we're creating these safe guards, that's the word I was looking for, safeguards that are going to protect them. But what that does is it stifles the experience a little bit. Um, you know, so it's like the difference between like telling your kid not to touch the stove, and I am not advocating for this. Please, no one come at me. But like a kid understanding the consequences by touching the stove that's hot, right?
Sure.
Like hearing it versus feeling it is very different. By
Okay.
taking out the dad as the safeguard, we get to see Layla, or excuse me, Raquel's reaction to the possibility that her dad's going to be there, right? So instead of her standing up to her dad, who she really can't actually stand up to in the
Right.
original scene, this fact that she would hide from him really reveals a lot to both of the characters that they really kind of shows that understanding. Um,
Okay.
Definitely loved like this idea that she could stand up to him or she wants to stand up to him, but does it have the same emotional resonance for Layla?
Right.
No. And that's really what you want to think about is what is Layla feeling in this scene and giving your reader opportunities to feel those moments and letting Layla say all of those things that we as adults say in our mind that we filter out because we're not allowed to say, right? You know,
Right.
all of that raw emotion, in this case, the jealousy that she feels toward
Hmm.
Raquel. We want this scene to drip with that
Okay.
because that's what your readers are really going to connect to. What you've written initially is wonderful because it's very clean. Um, it's very understanding of the situation.
Okay.
That works much more in an adult situation. Not that adult stories can't also start with the emotion, but
Sure.
since you're going to young adult, I would definitely encourage you to move those moments to take off the this the filter. That's
Okay.
the word I want to use. Take the filter off and really focus on what is she feeling in this moment. So as we go through the scene, that's where I stopped kind of doing a side by side because I
Hmm.
wanted you to, first of all, see how this resonated with you, see
Yeah.
how it felt. And then if you like the direction that it's going, I wanted to pick part of the rest of the scene because a lot happens in this scene. She talks to her sister, she talks to her parents, and then she gets this exciting opportunity that she didn't really think was even possible.
Sure.
So you've got a lot of emotion happening in the scene, but Layla kind of stays in her emotional safe zone, right? Like she strained her face to make a smile at her mother. Her lips thinned. What good would talking do, right? Like these are some of the elements that you're talking about. And these are very adult processings of emotion versus this like raw, just leave me alone kind of element. So, what are you thinking?
Yeah, that's something I'm really going to have to go back really throughout all of her scenes and look at that adult processing versus that teenage processing. That's something globally that I need to go back and look at because I'm fairly sure it's going to be something I'm going to find throughout her scenes.
It it happens, and sometimes it's good to put a little bit of that adult voice, especially somebody who's 16 who
Hmm.
has probably been told a lot of times, not quite listening, not quite settled in, but she'll have these moments where she does start to process things in an adult way,
Right,
but probably not in the scene immediately following the winnowing, right? It's
right,
probably when she's in a place where she feels safe or in a place where the consequences are dire. Right now, she's at a festival, right? A
right.
festival that she's supposed to be having fun at. And instead, she's sequestered under a tree and she's not even allowed to go home, right? Like, understanding the emotional components of those really lets your reader connect. So, do you want to see how we can change part of the scene
Yeah,
together?
yeah, let's do that.
All right. So, do you want to do the part with her sister, the part with her parents, or the part with I don't know how to pronounce her name. the new woman who gives her the
Oh,
opportunity.
Cheon the assassin.
Chian.
Yeah.
Oh, she's an assassin. Oh, I didn't know that part. Uh, I like that. So, what part would make the most sense for you to see next?
Let's see. I think for me, it's very brief, but her and her older brother would be interesting because
Okay.
he's the other POV character. So I think there's a lot of to learn there because we're dealing with both of my POV characters.
Oh, right at the same time. Yes, I
Yeah,
like that. Okay. So Raquel's dad, and then this is her sister brings her the cake, right?
yeah, yeah,
And
yeah.
then Nora laid the cake, and then Layla says
Yeah,
whatever. Okay,
yeah.
here we go.
This is where Torin, her older brother, shows up. It's very brief between them,
Okay.
but
All right. So we have Nora slowly turned and headed toward the Potter's house. Layla unwrapped the cake and took a bite. Its sweetness filled her mouth. I love all of your specific details. I am terrible at words, so I'm just gonna skip over them.
yep.
The leaves crunched, announcing Torin's arrival. So yeah, that could have gone better. Layla stared straight ahead. You think? Torin shuffled his feet. I wish I could tell you it gets easier, but it doesn't. Layla took another bite of the cake. Aren't you just a ray of sunshine? Yeah, right. Torin turned away. Sorry. He trudged back toward the festival. Layla finished the cake and stared at the sky. The full moon shone brightly, and the hound constellation moved into the center of the sky. So again, this is the imagery of this is beautiful, but the conversation between Torin and Layla is very careful. So, my question for you is their relationship together careful?
I wouldn't say it's careful. The main dynamic is that, as twins, Torn and his twin Nora have always been very close.
Hmm.
And then you had the brother come along and he was gifted, so he's kind of the star child of the family. And so Layla's always kind of been the baby. And so um, they haven't been super close. Torn still kind of thinks of her kind of in those terms, kind of as the baby. Um, so he's very close with Nora. They're twins, but I wouldn't say it's careful. I mean, again, his relationship toward her is protective as an older brother, but he
Hmm.
still kind of thinks of her as the baby. He doesn't really think of her as 16. We don't let people younger than us grow up sometimes as much.
Hmm.
So he doesn't really have that concept of her. He knows intellectually, yes, she's going through the winnowing, she's going to be coming of age and all that jazz, but she's still a, she's still his baby sister, or she's still a baby, kind of idea.
I love all of that, right? So, this idea that the oldest keeps the youngest kind of in a special place, right? Like they're going to do everything they can to protect the youngest, right? But he couldn't do anything to protect her in this situation, right?
Right.
So, presumably, this is one of the first times they've interacted since the winnowing, right?
Oh, it definitely is. Yes.
Okay. So, he understands the devastation of losing every single possibility of hope for the future by being named a tick. He knows where she is. He thought by being a tick, he was protecting her, right? Like their middle brother, he was safe, so why wouldn't she be safe?
Right.
So he's probably feeling a ton of failure in and of himself. So thinking about that, so yeah, that could have gone better, feels very devoid of the weight that she's feeling in this moment,
Right.
right? So thinking about what he can do to protect her or since he failed to protect her, thinking about kind of from a raw emotional standpoint, because again, he's only 20.
Mhm.
He's starting to think like an adult. He's had 4 years to feel what it feels like to live in this disappointment. And we saw that with Nora, right? Like
Mhm.
she's kind of owned her new position. She made the connection with Layla through cake,
Right.
right? That's where in the start of this that I started reading, Nora got the cake, right?
Right.
Or
And
excuse
girls
me,
typically mature a little bit
right.
faster.
Right. So really what you want to do is you want to pull the distinction between these two characters apart. So
Gotcha.
instead of,
Yep.
yeah, that could have gone better, which feels like it could have been, oh, you got a D on your whatever test, or, hey, mom and dad just found out that you ate the last cookie and now you got grounded, right? Like there's not enough weight on, so that could have gone better, seeing as it's the whole rest of her life. But at the same time, he's not having been through it and feeling like her protector. He's not going to come at her with, I'm here. I understand. Talk to me if you want to talk to me. And he's not coming at her the way her parents come at her, which is like, we still love you. It's
Right.
okay. We still love you. But her father really can't show that, right? Like
Right.
he needs to bring something all of his own.
Right.
My suggestion, because Torin is struggling with his own sense of failure and success in the story that
Mm.
you're already showing your reader, I would start with him approaching her with his own failure. Something along the lines of, I'm sorry I couldn't protect you, or this shouldn't have happened. I would do anything to take away the, right? Like
Right.
making him make it about himself instead of about her or the situation brings something different to the conversation, but also gives you insight into what Torin is thinking because we're going to see him in the next scene.
Right. And
How do you feel about that?
the other thing I wanted to ask you about from Layla's perspective, what I wanted to really put in this, and I struggled. I know it's not there, and that's why one of the things I wanted to ask you about. I really need to have Layla react to him in a way that shows that Layla is jealous of Torrin and Nora's close relationship as twins.
Hmm.
Like from Layla's perspective, like we're sisters. That should trump twins, and it doesn't.
Right.
And so I've got to figure out a way for her voice to also communicate that.
Yeah. So I love what you're saying there. And I think the complexity of the relationship is really important. If you want to do that, I would actually do it in the interaction with Layla and Nora.
Oh, okay, okay.
So right now, when Nora comes and brings her cake, she kind of pushes Nora away. If
Hmm.
she's really been desperate for this sister relationship,
Hmm.
she probably would have cried in Nora's
Mm.
arms, right? Like,
Okay,
because Nora's reaching out to her, Nora's been through this, right? Like,
okay.
you of all people are going to understand this. So
Right,
instead of Nora being the one that's like, I understand this, you still want her to do that. Obviously, that's important.
right.
But Layla should really like lean into that and be like, of course you understand. Yes, like, can we spend time together? Can we do
Okay,
all of these things? And then Nora's the one who's like, well, yes, of course, but tomorrow,
right.
right? Because I have all of these other things to do, right? Like of all the people Layla wants to come to visit her, Nora's the one that she's been wanting. So by
Okay,
turning the relationship around, so the desperation, we're feeling the desperation from Layla, then when Torin comes around, she can be like, I don't want you. Like Torin's trying to reach out to her. Torin's trying to do the thing she
right.
wants from Nora. She's not getting it from Nora, so now she's going to punish Torin for it,
Hmm.
which also gives you that ability for Torin to come in as the protective older brother, right? Like he's always had a close connection with Nora because she's his twin, but the protection of the twin is different, right? Like
Right.
twins are often seen as equals. They're the
Hmm.
same age, they're going through these things at the same time, whereas Torin sees Layla as someone who needs protection,
Right,
right?
right, right.
And that difference, right? Like, and Torin, especially because in the very next scene, we see Torin and Layla together again, um, but in a very different context,
Yeah.
right? So being able to show kind of this hurt that Layla feels toward Torin that he can't even control, right?
Right,
Like,
right,
I'm trying to be the good big brother. I'm trying to protect you. I'm trying to reach out. I'm trying to be the one who is going to support you because I know you are desperate for that, but you don't want it from me. You want it from Nora.
right,
Like, all that complexity of 16 years of sibling dynamics, you're trying to put in half a page, right?
right, right,
That's a
right.
really challenging situation. Congratulations for writing yourself into that. Um, but I think it rings really true, especially for those of us who have siblings and have had to like navigate those dynamics.
Right.
So, what I would recommend is with that in mind, instead of Torin announcing his arrival with the leaves crunching, so yeah, that could have gone better. Maybe he just sits down next to her and puts his arm around her and doesn't even say anything. And she can say, leave me alone. And he can say, I get it. I'm here for you. I understand, right? Like
Mm.
I want to I want to help, right? Like maybe even in that small, and maybe it's not I want to, maybe it's how can I help? How can I
Right, right,
and
right.
maybe it's not how can I help? Maybe it's how can I make it better, right? And the reason that I wanted to do this with you
Hmm.
is you'll kind of notice how I started with, so yeah, that could have gone better. I identified why it wasn't hitting the way we want it to hit. We talked about the backstory.
Right.
Based off of the backstory, we started with something, and then I iterated it two or three or four times in my head to figure out where do we want it to land before we put it down on the page.
Okay.
And it's sometimes that just tweaking of one or two words that makes the difference between I want to help and how can I make it better.
Mhm.
Those two statements are very, very different from one
Right.
another as to how they're going to be responded to. Now, obviously, you want Layla to stay in her hurt and her pain and her disappointment and want to push him away. If
Hmm.
you were telling it from Torrance perspective, as Layla pushed him away, you would have all of the emotional, I understand why she's pushing me away, but I just want to protect her. I just want to keep her, whatever. But you're not telling it from Torin's perspective. You're telling it from Layla's perspective. So
Right.
we only get the small bits of Torin and we get Layla's inner turmoil.
Right. And if it was torn, it'd also be more of his, well, I screwed something else up.
Exactly, exactly. And
Okay.
I
Okay.
think being able to bring that to the conversation is really important. So let's go ahead and do
Okay.
it. So the leaves crunched announcing Torin's arrival. What do you want him to say to her?
So I think let's see. Let me think about this for a second. So I think the idea of him kind of sitting down next to her and kind of putting his arm around her, um, but her kind of pushing that away. So I think he would apologize first. That seems like his thing, like, because he's one taking responsibility for something that's not his responsibility, but also diving into his insecurities about failure. I feel like, I'm sorry, I should have been able to stop this or something along those lines. I'd have to think about that a little bit more. You know, it would be I'm sorry, but I'm sorry that I failed you. Something to that effect. So let me think
I
about
like that. I'm
this.
sorry I failed you.
Yeah.
Yeah, let's and again, you can always go back and edit
Yeah.
this.
Yeah.
We want that raw. I like that, right? Like he's making it about him.
Hmm.
in that moment. And you can have Layla respond to that, right? So I love what you said. I'm just going to go ahead and write it. Layla pushes his arm away, and she's mad because he's making it about him. So I'm just going to, in the interest of time, go, this isn't about you. Obviously, like a teenager might say that differently,
Sure.
right? Or maybe instead of saying this isn't about you, she's like, you didn't fail, I did.
Mm,
Right. I'll just put that in brackets just so you can play
okay,
with it later.
good.
And then maybe that leads to I'm the one who failed, right? Again, getting down to the nitty-gritty of it.
Right.
Um, you know, so now she's in this place where like he feels terrible for himself and for her. He's trying to reach out, and yet again, she's like, I don't want you. I want somebody else.
Right, right, right.
What's his reaction going to be to that?
Oh, oh. Well, I think his reaction is going to be similar to what you see here. Kind of a dejected kind of, I'm sorry. I always he wouldn't say I always screwed up, but that's what he's going to be thinking. He's like, he'd be just like, I'm sorry, and he would just remove himself from the situation. Internally, he's going, I would screw this stuff up. So,
Okay.
you know, but it was just like, I'm sorry, and just he would just remove himself from the situation at that point, wrapped up now in his own failure.
Okay. I like that. Let's give him a couple more moments.
Okay.
Here, let's let him reach out one more time with a
Okay.
little bit of hopefulness. You did it here with I wish I could tell you it gets easier, but it doesn't. Again,
Okay.
I like this sentiment, but
Hmm.
it focuses on the negative,
Right.
having him kind of focus on how do you live with failure, which is kind of what you're doing here, but she says this isn't about you. He wants to protect her.
Right.
Giving him the option one more time to reach out and be like, I wanted to protect you from this,
Right.
right? But you have that up here. So maybe, um, I don't know, I'm just going to spitball here. Um, this shouldn't have happened like this, and I'm going to fix it.
The other thing he could say, thinking about this, is basically, look, if anyone if anyone tries to give you a hard time or hurt you because you're a tick, let me know and I'll take care of it.
I love that. Oh, that's so good. Yes. I'm going to just break that up a little
Yeah,
bit.
yeah.
I liked his body language here. Torin shuffled his feet. So if anyone, Torin shuffled his feet. If you have any trouble, I'll take care of it.
Right.
Right. So then Layla, again, doesn't want anything from her brother.
Hmm.
How's she going to respond? I will give you a hint.
Okay.
There is no one on the planet meaner than a teenage girl who's been
Okay.
hurt. Torin is feeling his own failure here.
Yep.
Layla is likely going to reflect that failure back
Hmm.
on him. Because
Okay.
again, a hurt teenager is going to lash out and make everyone around them hurt.
She'd probably be something of like, please don't try, you'll just screw it up.
Yep. I'm just going to shorten that to so you can screw that up too.
Yes. Yeah. Okay.
Now, here's the thing about saying something like this from a teenage voice.
Okay.
You want to balance the meanness of this out with something understandable in the internalization of this, right?
Okay.
Like in the moment that she says this, she's trying to hurt her brother, but the minute the words leave her mouth, we want to be able to feel the remorse. She's not going to take it back. She's not going to
Right.
say she's sorry in this moment, but we want to understand why she would say something so terrible. So I'm
Mhm.
just going to go ahead and give this a quick Torin's face fell.
Mhm.
Layla couldn't believe she said that to her brother,
Okay.
right? So the reason we want to do this is we want Layla to remain likable throughout
Right,
the
right, right.
story. So for her to say something so mean and so hurtful, we need to balance that out with like, she's not a bad person. She's just
Yeah.
sad and she's hurting.
Yeah.
So if this were an adult story, you would probably say something like, Layla knew she shouldn't have said, she shouldn't blame her brother for this. Um, she was dealing with her own pain and she shouldn't take it out on other people, right? But this is young adult. That's really adult processing. So we want to boil it down to she couldn't believe she said that to her brother.
Gotcha. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
And that's that adult filter
Hmm.
between adults understand why we say and we do things. It doesn't always stop us from saying and doing the wrong thing, but we've been conditioned to be like, be nice to other people. Just because we're hurt doesn't mean we can hurt other people, right? Like all
Right.
of those things that we're taught throughout our lives. Um, she's heard it, she knows it, she sees the reaction, but she doesn't know how to bring it back.
Gotcha.
Um, and now this is where Torin can turn away,
Yeah.
sorry, and he trudged back toward the festival,
Right.
right? So you can see your start and your ending were great anchor points. We
Hmm.
just needed to pull the emotional elevation up
Hmm.
in the scene.
Okay. Oh,
So,
this is so good. This is so helpful.
oh, I'm so glad. Um, but you see how much time it takes, right?
Yes.
Like
Yes.
editing is often, especially when you have a really emotional scene like this, trying to get into the head of your character. So, a
Right.
couple of tips and tricks for you.
Okay.
Um, the first thing is kind of figure out what kind of scene you're writing. This scene was highly emotional.
Right.
You want everything in the scene to highlight the emotions that the character is feeling. And you did this really smart thing in writing this, Ted. You gave Layla interactions with almost everyone in her life who is important to her,
Right. Right.
right in a row. So you get to see how this hurt and this pain manifests differently between each one of them.
Hmm.
And the pain that she's feeling needs to escalate with every interaction, right? Like we started way back here with Raquel
Hmm.
and just being like, leave me alone.
Right.
And
Right.
then she kind of tricks her friend in my version. Obviously, your version looks a little bit different, right?
Sure.
Like, with this idea that, like, see, I knew I was right. Nobody was going to want to spend time with me. And then her sister shows up and she wants desperately to cling to her sister. And her sister's like, but I have to go now because I
Right.
have these
Right.
other responsibilities, right? Because
Right.
she's embraced her life. And then Torin comes, who could give her wants to give her the comfort that she so desperately desires, but then she pushes him away. And then where's she left with? Her mom and her
Hmm.
dad, who are very adult in their understanding and their processing of it. And you did a great job with them with this, like, nothing is going to change, right? Dad, and dad says like all the right things, right? Like all of those things happen. And here she's left alone again, thinking that there's no hope for her. Nothing is like, so now it was bad at the beginning and now it's terrible. And in
Right.
walks this assassin,
And the
right?
dad subtext came through okay?
Hmm. Yeah,
Okay.
absolutely.
Okay.
Yep. Yeah, definitely that understanding of like, I'm going to say exactly what your mother wants me to say, but right, like it was good. It was really good.
Okay.
Um, so it's almost like you have experience as a dad talking to teenagers,
Yeah,
right?
I'm gonna have to watch myself with that because
Yeah.
yes.
I mean, our lived experience is what we pour into our stories in
Yeah.
some way or another. I definitely applaud you for turning that story around and writing it from a different perspective. That you've created a beautiful challenge for yourself, but
Thank
you
you.
you obviously have shown an aptitude for it. So in this last scene where she meets Chian, um, this is where you want all of that turmoil and that hatred and that self like loathing to come out. Right now, when Chion shows up, it's very polite. It's
Mhm.
very like, this has a purpose. It's going somewhere, right? Like, as maybe she hears somebody approach and she's like, go away, thinking it's her sister again or Torin
Sure.
again or whatever, right? Like, and then she doesn't know this person and she maybe doesn't like this person on sight, right? Like this idea that we don't see many, like don't maybe I don't know obviously the backstory of the world, but
Right.
like thinking about how is this teenage girl going to feel about being approached by a stranger on the very worst day of her life after she has had five of the most negative interactions she's ever had in her whole life.
Right.
That emotionality has to come into this opportunity, right? Like we need to see her go from her grouchy Gus into her like hopeful Holly, right?
Right.
Like that transition from like my life is over to wait, there's a possibility.
Right.
There is one thing from a story perspective that I
Okay.
think you need to make sure you make clear, and I might have missed this as I was reading it.
Okay.
Why is it that she is sneaking out of the house and not telling anyone goodbye? Is it because Jian tells her that she can't, or because she thinks they're going to try to stop her?
Oh, it's definitely because she thinks they're going to try to stop her.
Okay, so you got to make sure that that comes across really, really clearly.
Okay.
Because at the end it says she had to find Papa, go back home and pack.
Mm-hmm.
That almost feels like she's going to tell him what she's doing. But in the
Okay.
next chapter, we see that she leaves before sunrise, which, oh, by the way, her brother is also doing. So, sorry, I
Oh,
got
how
this
convenient.
right. I got distracted by kind of the process of it,
Yeah.
figuring out what type of scene it is. This scene was really emotional. The next scene with Torin is kind of an establishing scene or an
Mhm.
experiential scene. You're introducing new dynamics, new
Okay.
problems into the story,
Hmm.
and Torin is gathering experience for what he needs in order to move forward.
Right.
So you don't necessarily have to focus on his emotion as raw as you
Okay.
did with Layla,
Hmm.
but you definitely want to make sure you're putting in the what and the why of what he's doing. You're really great at telling us what he's doing,
Okay.
the why of it, the internalization, the struggle that he's having internally with being a failure,
Hmm.
tied with the hope of well, now I get to go back to the training that I was taken out of. I
Right.
planned for it, but then I lost it. But now I have this hope, this like, but I'm going to ruin it again, right? Like,
Hmm.
everything I do, I start well, but then I end up failing. This is just
Yes.
another one of those opportunities. You want to make sure that comes across on the page.
That's exactly what I'm going for with them.
Excellent. So, yeah, be empowered to write that inner thought between the dialogue. So,
Okay.
one of the reasons that you might be finding that your dialogue feels the same for all of the people is because the inner thought of the POV character
Hmm.
isn't coming through.
Okay.
So, being able to, let me just give you an example of this. I know we're a little over on time, but since we're talking about how to move forward, I just want to be able to show you this.
Sure.
Okay, so here he meets up with Layla because they both escaped, right? Um, um, she says to him, I don't need his permission, meaning their father's. I'm not, after my winnowing, I'm not a kid anymore. Still, Papa and Mama should know. Torin jerked his thumb back the other way it came. Let's go back and talk with them. That line could be in either scene perspective of whether it's Layla's scene or Torin's scene, but where you make it Torin's is Torin jerked his thumb back the way it'd come. He didn't want to go home. He wanted to but go to his training, but he couldn't leave Layla out here by herself, right? His followers said that they were leaving at first light. I can't be late. Torin was torn. Um, it wasn't right to not tell their parents, but she was determined that she was going to go. So he was going to protect her, right?
Mhm.
Giving the inner thought
Okay.
takes those moments that are just, and now, Ted, you can't do this everywhere throughout your story because it gets way too long. But
Sure.
punctuating part of the conversation with what your point of view character is thinking and feeling
Okay.
in short bursts the best you can are going to help pull those things away because when you're just putting stuff in quotes and you're just putting body language, we
Hmm.
don't get the full picture of why. Body
Okay.
language can be really clear, but it can also be really misunderstood, right? Like matching her stride for stride,
Hmm.
we can picture what that looks like. But is he matching her stride for stride because he's worried about her, right? Like keeping pace with her because he doesn't want her to get away is very different than I'm going to control you. So
Okay.
the pacing itself, if you can add in some places a little bit of inner thought,
Okay.
and usually I recommend that. So there are three parts to expression when you're talking about kind of the point of view character. You've
Okay.
got the inner thought that we've been talking about, you've got the body language that you're
Hmm.
very good at, and you've got the dialogue, right?
Right.
The stuff that's put in the quotes. I usually recommend using two out of the three of them whenever possible, but try not to always use the same two. Right now, you lean very much toward body
Yep.
language and
Yep.
dialogue.
So,
Sometimes try switching out dialogue and inner thought or body language and inner thought, right? Like we don't always have to say with our mouth what we're thinking, right? Like in
hmm.
this case, maybe instead of matching her stride for stride, maybe he's 4 years older than her. Presumably, he's
Right.
been training, so he's probably faster than she is. So maybe he gets in front of her and he blocks her path and crosses his arms and doesn't say anything and is like, she's gonna, I'm gonna stop
Hmm.
her. So he
Hmm.
stands in front of her, crosses his arms, and then
Okay.
she walks around him, right?
That 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 that's really good. That triangle is really good.
Yeah. So, but this is what you're going to want to do. You're going to want to understand the purpose of your scene and then focus on those elements. If it's emotional, really kick up the emotion and make sure that everything that comes out of the emotional character's mouth
Hmm.
is dripping with what they're feeling. If it's a
Okay.
more experiential scene like Torrens, you want us to understand how the experience is impacting your point of view character. So you're going to
Hmm.
want to rely on the inner thought to help us understand, why is this important? Why are these things happening? What is he hoping to get out of it? What is he afraid is going to come out of it? Making sure you put those points in means that when we get to the big battle scene or the big decision-making scene later, we understand fundamentally who this character is, so
Hmm.
we understand the decisions that they make.
That's so good.
So I think
Okay.
you're off to a really great start here. I think your world building is great. And I love that you're putting the world building in to help us understand the story and
Hmm.
not 7 paragraphs of what the winnowing is. I know, as a lazy reader, I definitely
Yeah.
appreciate that perspective. But yeah, I would say that the thing that I encourage you to do the most is, as you're writing, let your adult filter go and
Right.
really just give yourself permission to feel all of the feelings and say all of the things that as adults we wish we could say but never actually get to say. So,
That's really good. This has been really, really helpful. I really appreciate you guys
yeah,
providing this service, and I just wanted to say thank you. That was
yeah,
really helpful.
excellent, excellent. I'm going to go ahead and turn the recording off.
Okay.
I have to stop sharing first, though.